we're just talking about the pick swap. So the one on Friday was just like a bomb got dropped on the trade period when Hawthorn just grew tired of dealing with West Coast, whether that was right or wrong on their behalf, but they did. They checked out and they offered 14 to the Blues. So this thirst for pick swapping in the best draft we've seen for ages is relentless. And we'll get to where things sit at the moment with the Suns pick 13, and even West Coast pick 3 now is the new one that they're all fighting over, Kane, particularly the Blues. But Tommy Morris reported last night that it was pick 9, which Essendon have been trying to offload for a while, given the Isaac Kako bids that are going to come. And it was Melbourne who struck the deal in the end to get it. They got Essendon's pick 9 in exchange for their future first round and their pick 28 this year as well. So it gives the Demons picks 5 and 9 in this year's draft, which is a solid starting point.
It's a really good starting point for them. What do you think that's it for them, or do you think they're going to take them to the draft, or they're going to try and package those two up for something better?
Yeah, I think they either take them to the draft or they try to get higher again. They're not going to circle back for Dan Houston. That ship has well and truly sailed, and I don't think there's any other players on the radar there. So no, that's definitely a draft move, and I just wonder where the Blues go from here. Like, we'll get to Dan Houston in a moment, but to have 12 and 14, they're already working with West Coast to try to get 3 off them. So it's still a draft play. But I tell you, no one at Carlton is ruling out Dan Houston. They still remain in the shadows. So it's still Collingwood's to stuff up and Gold Coast to a lesser extent, but the Blues are there.
Is there a chance that, there's some influential people at the Blues that clearly want Dan Houston, and those are probably, I would think, the coach who probably needs to win next year, and I think he'd be pretty keen. He would have worked with him at Port Adelaide, and he would know Dan Houston's character inside out and the player that he can be. So I would think if you're Michael Voss, you go, hang on, are we really prepared to turn our back on Dan Houston, who's going to instantly help us next year and maybe the difference? And then there must be some others who go, no, we love this draft and we're going to go to the draft and shore us up for the future. There's probably some salary cap concerns, which you've highlighted throughout the last couple of weeks. Would I be on the right page?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm Michael Voss, I want him in now. I mean, that's that much as obvious. But I can tell you that the list management team, they are united. They love this draft. You would struggle to find a club fawning over the draft as much as Carlton in this period. Like, they love the draft. So it's a draft play for them. But at the same time, if Dan Houston was to suddenly present as a realistic option, and they've been at arm's length all the way through, basically, then I think that they'd be duty-bound to explore it. But it's Collingwood's to stuff up. And there's some frustration at Collingwood as well, by the way. We'll come back to that in regards to where Port Adelaide are at and the bargain or the high price they are demanding for Dan Houston.
Why would they be frustrated, though? We're seeing what all clubs who have a highly credentialed contracted player. Just look at the way Richmond are handling their 2 contracted players. Why would Collingwood think this was just going to be an easy one? Like, clearly Port Adelaide right from the start have said it's essentially going to take 2 first-round picks. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to get to that. I don't know why there should be any surprise from Collingwood.
Because I think that in another world they would have loved, Port would have loved it, Collingwood certainly would have loved it, probably more than Port Adelaide, is if one of those 2 Giants free agents actually chose Port Adelaide. Yep. So if Perryman had got there and Cumming had got there, then we probably wouldn't still be having this standoff over Dan Houston. So that definitely fits into it. And from a power perspective, you can understand it as well. You missed out on those 2 targets, then you are going to want full freight. No bones about it for Dan Houston. John's just texted in as well, by the way, when it comes to tight asses out there. Johnny, according to SEN's own Hayes, Clive Waterhouse invited all the Freo players over for a barbecue and bonding session, and as they left, he charged everyone. Paul Hayes will be coming. Thanks, John, for that nomination as well. Yep. Righto. Keep your texts coming through. We'll get to that in a moment. So that's the deal that Essendon and Melbourne struck. Now, Tom also reported yesterday, this was intriguing, that the Saints have pulled out of the Ivan Soldo trade, citing issues with the longevity of his knees as the main reason for withdrawing their interest. They didn't fail the medical as such, but just got cold feet, the Saints, on bringing in a player with some injury concerns.
So this is bad news for Port Adelaide, really, because he's out. He didn't even turn up to the best and fairest, this guy. And as you said, from probably the first day that he arrived at Port Adelaide, he regretted going there. Has not fit into the culture, the team environment. So I just don't know where this goes to from here. And Port Adelaide would love to offload him, I would think, to another club that's desperate for a ruckman. But the alarm bells from everyone else are going, no, well, if the Saints don't want him because of his knee, and there's some concerns over his character. We don't want him either. So there's no way Port Adelaide are going to get their investment back in what they gave to him. So maybe he does go back, but if he does go back, it's not going to be pretty for him. He's got a lot of respect to earn back from a playing group that would be pretty upset with the way that he's handled himself, I would have thought.
Yeah, has that famous, but I saw it pop up on my feed the other night, the Roaming Brian segment where they'd had a good win, Port Adelaide. I think Soldo will play quite well, and the family and all the connections are in the room, and there's a couple of drive-bys for Richmond from the Soldo camp.
Right.
How do you like that, Richmond?
Yeah.
How are you liking that, Richmond? Well, at the moment, they're probably liking it a lot. I don't reckon there'd be any regrets, put it that way.
Richmond are going, thank goodness we got this problem, off our hands. So if it's an early hot seat for Port Adelaide, I mean, they need to sort out this mess. I mean, when you invest a significant amount, and we're not talking first-round draft picks, but he didn't come cheap, Ivan Soldo, and it was sort of complicated the way that they got all those deals done last year, but they gave up everything to get those 3 players in, and he was one of them, set to lead their ruck division for the next 3 to 4 years, has not even been able to do that, questions over his body, definitely questions over his character. The guy didn't turn up to the best and fairest, for goodness sake. Like, long-term contract at the club, because he can't win the first ruck spot, he wants out the minute that happens, so he's just looking for an easy out, and it's been really poorly handled by him, and I'm not sure who his management is, but they got to be thrown into this as well for how poorly they've advised their client.
This text, are we going to talk about the nightmare of an off-season the Hawks are having? Miss Perryman, Miss Bailey Smith, overpaid battle, could miss Barras and got trigger happy with trading out 14 and now trying to trade back in for 13 with the same picks they got for 14. Well, that's a different take from 295, who has gone early.
Interesting. What do you think of that?
Well, there's 3 days to go, and I think they'll get Barras, and it might turn out that they get him for less. I just think he gets there. He gets there. And the only way he can get there is with the futures that Hawthorn have got. Might involve another club, might involve another player, might involve other picks, but he just gets there.
He just gets there.
And I think that was just so fascinating the way they did that, Hawthorn. You speak about sort of Soldo and perhaps he's not going back. There's no way Barras is going back to West Coast.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. I think that would be unlikely. And that's what I love about Hawthorn. They're probably just confident that they're that far down the line of this happening. And the Eagles, with where they are at, I mean, they're desperate for draft picks. Their whole rebuild revolves around getting draft picks. So they don't want to keep a 28, 29-year-old when they can get into the draft again. So Hawthorn have just called their bluff, essentially, and said, okay, we'll work out a different way to do it. It's exactly what Fremantle should be doing with Bolton, because Shea Bolton, he has checked out, and you saw the way that he's played this year. And I think there's some players that can go back to their footy club, and after they've requested a trade, we've seen Dunkley do it, we've seen Papley do it. Now, Bryce Gibbs did it reasonably well at Carlton. We saw Ryan O'Keefe do it in a big way after they've requested a trade go back. Bolton's not one of those. So Fremantle don't need to overpay for Shea Bolton. Yeah, Richmond can say, oh, we'll have him back if you don't give us the price you want. But good luck. Like, Shea Bolton, didn't he speak about his partner had already moved back to West Australia at the best and fairest? He's out, that guy. So we saw that he was checked out this year. I mean, what sort of a player would Richmond get if Shea Bolton was denied that trade and he went back to Richmond, a team that's probably going to finish last next year? So this is where Fremantle just got to hold firm and do essentially what Hawthorn have done is, okay, well, we know you want this to happen, and we will call your bluff on the huge demands, and that's exactly what Freo should do with Richmond.
Okay, so where that sits at the moment, and this maybe we'll get into this, where are they now, the update on where all the key players anyway sit coming into the last 3 days of the trade period. We know he's got that deal through to the end of 2028, Shea Bolton. It is lucrative. So no real changes, best I can tell. Fremantle has offered 10 and 18. That's on the table for Bolton. Richmond is keen for a better hand. They want Freo's 10, but they want Freo's 11 as well. So that is all to play out at the moment.
So, I mean, we've put Richmond in the hot seat a little bit. Are they being a bit cute here? Like,
I think the situation Richmond's in, I don't blame them at all. So they finished last. They've got an exodus on their hands.
What if it backfires on them?
Well, it's not going to backfire. I mean, at the end of the day, if it gets to deadline and they have to relent and they have to accept what Fremantle, so be it. But you have a crack, though. You got to deal hard, surely. You can't have players thinking they can just stroll out whenever.
Yeah, I mean, 6 is a pretty good deal for
for Dan Rioli.
Yeah. I think you'd be sort of taking that and moving on and addressing other areas of your list and not getting held up on for 2 weeks on a pick 23 that you're just not going to get. So
Yeah.
I would be more inclined to just do that deal and do it and run before Gold Coast change their mind. It's the deal of the century. And then with Bolton.
I think Gold Coast are too far down the road with Rioli.
Yeah.
I think that's as coach driven as much as anything. I can't see a world where Gold Coast let this fish off the hook. So maybe Richmond know that. And again, is he a sort of a player that Richmond could keep? I mean, is he different to Shea Bolton?
So is Damien Hardwick too emotional in this? Like, is he letting his personal relationships with Dan Rioli, who he must love and have a close relationship? I think that's been well documented. Does he need to be pulled back a little bit? Like, if the coach is doing this again after doing it at Richmond with Hopper and Taranto and then leaving 9 games in, do they have to be a little bit careful of the amount of control that a second-year coach is going to have over this list?
Well, hard for us to say from the outside looking in, isn't it? But there is a clear working and personal relationship between the pair. Having said all that, I think he'd look mighty fine in a Suns
it'd be really good. Yeah, he'd not pick 6 good, but he'd be a really handy player. I mean, they got assets everywhere, and once again, it's a different story when you're talking about Gold Coast because of the amount of first-round draft picks they've had and top 10 picks even just recently. You go through the whole of the list. So they are young. They know they're young. They want to add some experience, and Rioli's going to fit in nicely, but it's, you want to be careful when a coach such as that and Alistair Clarkson and Craig McRae start pulling all of the strings in your list management decisions.
John's text in. Fremantle have offered 10, 11 and 18 for Bolton and Baker if the Baker to the Eagles deal falls through. Now, he was probably the one who suffered the most out of the Hawthorn-Carlton exchange, Liam Baker, because Richmond clearly had 14 earmarked for Liam Baker, and West Coast, we thought were going to part with that, maybe amongst other things after the Barris exchange had gone through. So is it now a separate deal with West Coast that now that 14 is gone for Baker, or is a big pivot to Fremantle on the cards? That's unlikely from what I've heard over the weekend. I think everything is still going into getting him to West Coast.
Why does he want to go to West Coast?
I'm not sure, but he's made up his mind he wants to get there.
Because of the coach?
A lot of work has gone into it. Well, the coach, I think, was the icing on the cake. If you're
Baker, though, like, there's another premiership up for grabs at Fremantle.
We don't know what the offers are, though, do we? We don't. There might be wildly different offers between the two clubs.
Maybe West Coast are offering him $900,000 and Fremantle can go to $600,000. So maybe you're right on that.
And over the course of a long-term
it's a lot.
contract.
Yeah. So and maybe he likes the fact that, look, I've had my success. I want to play for the biggest club in Perth. And I want to help rebuild this group and be a mentor. There may be
part of the
but
resurgence.
just in terms of on-field enjoyment and the prospect of winning another premiership, if that's important, Fremantle are ready to go. And they've got all their picks on the table, do they, for those 2 players?
Yeah, no, the indication has always been that if they were able to get a commitment from Baker as well as Bolton, then those 3 first-rounders would just go straight to Richmond. So I think if you're the Tigers, that's almost the best scenario. But at the moment, it looks as though Liam Baker's still committed to getting to West Coast. So will West Coast, and this is what maybe Carlton are counting on, do the Eagles have to split 3 to get Baker in? I mean, that's a pretty high possibility at the moment.
This is the ridiculous thing about players dictating and the power that players and player agents have in the trade period. Like, if Fremantle's deal is the best for Richmond, that's what the deal should be. And now you're taking in the contract, but we spoke about last week. Well, maybe if a player, he's out of contract, so slightly different.
He's out. It has to be different.
Slightly different, yeah. But, if you're contracted, if he was contracted for a year to go, that should be best available bid. Understand it's different with Baker on this occasion.
Yeah, and there's plenty of those examples. Don't worry about that. So Bailey Smith, I mean, you opened the furnace with him last night. This is the most fascinating where are they now, because we've said from the outset that the Dogs are talking tough and the Cats, typically steadfast in what they would be willing to offer, which is their 17, their best pick. The Dogs don't like it one bit. They want a much higher pick, as high as single digits. Geelong are saying what we're offering is fair, take it or leave it. Smith's management is saying, fine, walk him. The offer's fair. He gets to Geelong anyway. It's a very strong draft. No one's going to take Bailey Smith. Richmond have most of the picks. And if the Tigers do their deals as expected, there's only going to be 9 different clubs with picks. So you run through the 9. It's hard to see who's going to just defy everyone and pick him. And this is what we love, the backgrounding, the politics, the threats behind the scenes if he was to go to the draft.
So why this is the point. Why would Geelong even trade him? If Paul Connors and his management, or whoever looks after Bailey Smith, Robbie, whoever it is, if they are that confident that no one is going to pick him up, and the Western Bulldogs are trying to drive a bargain that is just not there for Bailey
Well, it's
Smith.
better for everyone,
he's
isn't
out,
it?
He's out of contract. Why don't they just go, okay, don't worry about it, it's off. We're gonna take pick 17 in a good draft, go and get a youngster, and we'll go through, because are Richmond going to take him at 1? No. North Melbourne won't. West Coast won't. Adelaide, without speaking to him and getting Bailey Smith to move at 4, aren't going to take him.
You're not going to give up 4.
So they're not
Bailey
taking him
Smith.
at 4. Melbourne are going to have 5 and possibly 9. Would Melbourne take him at 9?
No.
You don't reckon?
Surely not.
Why not?
Surely not.
Why not?
Well, I don't think you're going to use 9 on the best draft for such a long time to get Bailey Smith in the door. And okay, even if
what
they
pick
were,
was he?
run
He
it
was
through.
pick 6. You know what he is.
He was pick 7.
Pick
7, I think.
So you know what he is. He's dominated finals. He's in the prime of his career. I would rather take Bailey Smith, a known product, without, and I'll preface this by saying I haven't seen the players in the draft, but it's still a lottery. Top 10 picks, how many hit? In all of, so even in the super drafts, right? So you get your top 5. So 4 of the 5 hit. But in the top 10, how many of them historically in every draft hit? Are we talking 60% go on to play 200 games? It's not guaranteed that at pick 9 you're going to get a Bailey Smith. So anyway, he's not going to go to Fremantle at 10 or 11 because they're not even going to have those picks, and you probably wouldn't go out west. Would Carlton take him with one of their? No? Why?
I just think,
Why?
let's run it
Why
through.
wouldn't Carlton take him?
Let's see what happens here.
Desperately need some speed through the midfield.
So he goes to the draft. Can you imagine how hard Paul Connors would be working with all those 9 clubs to say, this guy does not want to play for you. He does not want to interview with you. He does not want a medical with you. He is refusing to play for you. Can you imagine? And by the way, if you do draft him, then we'll take Tom de Koning off your hands next year.
Yep.
You won't get an interview with these free agents that you're trying to get. They are a massive management stable.
What you are saying is the problem with the whole of the game. It's a huge issue with the game, because if he goes in, if I'm Carlton, I'm a Carlton fan at 14 and Bailey Smith's still on the board. Why are we getting? We desperately need help for Cripps and
it's
Walsh.
not that, but you know it doesn't work.
I know, but it should. That's the way that it should work. So the second part to this is, if you're Geelong, just do it. So it's like, all right, well, you've got until the end of today to accept pick 17, and that's all that there is. Otherwise, we're doing exactly that, and we're going to take 17 to the draft. Why not?
Xavier, Paul Connors v the Bulldogs coach. No love lost would be an understatement, and goes back multiple years, according to Xavier. So is it 17? Is it 17 and something else, just to allow everyone just to move on and save face? Or is it the draft? The relatively speaking nuclear
You'd love to
option.
see the draft, wouldn't you? You'd love to.
I
would.
Jack Lukosius, where are they now? I guess given the constant roadblocks between Port and Collingwood and the Suns over that 3-club trade, multiplayer trade, multi-pick trade, this one now seems destined for me, Kane, to be a standalone exchange. So the future first, it's on the table for Jack from Port. There'll be more involved. 2 years to go on a back-ended monster contract worth more than one. I'm told worth well north of 1 a year. Might even be as much as sort of 2.4 over the course of the next couple of years. So Port are taking on $2 million plus here. It'll be happening, though. Suns want to see him go on. Port stretches the deal right out, of course.
Yeah, so Tom said 6 years. This is the last contract that I want to give, the last player I want to give a long-term contract to.
Why is that?
Jack Lukosius. Because he needs to be on the edge. Is there ever been a time when Jack Lukosius has played on the edge? The answer to that is no, because Gold Coast, this highlights everything that the amount of mistakes that they have made repeatedly with their list. You're telling me this guy's on $1 million. He's playing VFL last year.
More
than $1 million for this. So that highlights everything you need to know about the way that Gold Coast continually butcher their list build. They've given Jack Lukosius $1 million. Yes, talented player. Back-ended, but even still, like the number that he is on. And then Port Adelaide are going to go, well, and I get it, right? Port Adelaide, well, we've got a talented player who wants to come home and play for us. He was picked 2 in the draft. He kicked 39 goals last year, and we'll make it work. And he's a far better prospect than Asava Radaglia playing in our forward line, or Quinton Narkle or Francis Evans. So I get it. But 6 years for a player who has never once played on the edge, like it's not Jake Stringer, but it's like Jake Stringer. You got to keep him on the edge to go, I've got to be hungry. Every performance, every game matters. My training standards, I've got to make the most out of the talent I've got. You're not going to get that when Port Adelaide just give him 6 years. So I just detest these long-term deals because players get so comfortable with that, knowing that, okay, even if I'm playing Sample, I'm still going to be earning my 800,000 for the next 6 years. It doesn't matter, and it hasn't mattered enough for Jack Lukosius. And I think it's a big year for him because he comes to Adelaide, the pressure's going to be a lot fiercer than what it's been on the Gold Coast for a long time. So be careful what you wish for, Jack, but you'd want to deliver a little bit more than what you have in the first half of your career.
Just some text coming through on Bailey Smith. The Mighty Ducks took Adam Banks when he didn't want to play for them,
Correct.
and they went on to win the local
That's
Pee-wee
it.
Hockey Championship. Take him, Saints. Also, Kane, be nicer to the Saints, please. He's a little disclaimer there.
Well, I mean, he would help the Saints, wouldn't he? I mean, we've heard. So, how many times Ross Lyon this year has complained about his midfield? Nearly every media conference, Ross has gone, my midfield, which wouldn't make you feel great if you're an actual midfielder at the Saints. How have they addressed that problem in this trade period? Like, when everyone's getting better and you look at their rivals who Gold Coast are going to come, they're looking to get better. Hawthorn are there and they're looking to get better. How the Saints going to jump them? Collingwood are looking to come from outside the 8 to get back into it because they're ready for the now. Carlton are doing the same. What are the Saints doing other than going to the draft with a couple of great picks? That's not going to help. That's not going to help this group that sacked a coach because they thought their list was better than where it currently was, and that was about where it is now, give or take a few positions on the ladder. So they're no better next year. I mean, Jack McRae's not going to help you. I mean,
Doesn't do it for you?
No, he's just not going to. He's not going to. You're not going to jump Carlton or Collingwood or Gold Coast or I mean, Adelaide are going to come. But all these teams outside Fremantle are going to come, Sam.
But when you can't attract marquee, and they have tried, goodness me, that's a list in itself. How many times have they swung and missed the Saints on marquee players?
Yep.
If you can't attract marquee players, and for every press conference that Ross Lyon's complained about his midfield, he's pumped up the culture and where they rate on the AFLPA survey and we're this and we're fifth and we're so good, come
And
to
we
us.
only train 16 hours a week.
He has tried everything, and they still haven't come.
Yeah, so
then you have to go to the draft.
Yes.
You just have to build the culture from scratch.
Yeah.
If you 7 and 8 goes to that same, make sure it's not a Hunter Clark and a Caulfield.
So have they
They're
been-
just solid play. Pick stars, and the rest will transpire.
No, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but if that's the case and you can't attract the players like Geelong can or like Hawthorn are currently at the moment, have they done this aggressively enough, or are they half in? Is there one foot in the swimming pool when you're just worried? Is it nice to swim or not? I'm just going to check the swim. Is there one foot in the swimming pool, or are they all in? Because if they're all in on the draft, don't be signing Zach Jones. Don't be going to get McRae. Trade out Jack Steele and get really rebuild the group.
Trade your captain.
Yeah, 100%. Like, so if that's your strategy, and if you can't get to the players that you want now to help you be better next year, then be more aggressive, like Hawthorn did 2 years ago, and really go to the draft.
Well, they've got 2 top 10 picks, which is nothing to sneeze at.
It's not. They're not doing what Richmond are doing, are they? Like, if that's the case, and if that's where you think you're at, and if the draft's the only play because you can't attract anyone, then do what Richmond have done and try and get 8 picks inside the top 30 rather than 2 or 3.
Jeff, McRae will be St Kilda's second best midfielder when he comes in. That's coming through.
That's a concern.
Where Jack McRae sits at the moment. So St Kilda, my information was going to use 47 on Ivan Soldo. That was the pick earmarked for Ivan. Now that's not going to happen. Could it be used for McRae? I don't think if you're the Saints, you're giving up any more than that. That's for sure. He's due solid coin for the next 3 years. Now the Dogs have been insistent that they won't be letting Jack McRae go, All-Australian, Premiership player, whatever, for a later pick. They're holding out for more, but it's not going to be their 27, the Saints. That would be madness.
Where do you think they finish next year, the Saints? Give me a range of where you think they finish again, and I bet you it is in football quicksand once again.
Yeah, the snap judgment, snap reaction is 8 to 12.
Yes. Yeah, I'd go 8 to 14, and that's where they live, the Saints, and that's not a great place to live because it doesn't get you to the top 3 or 2 in the draft, and it has you right where they are now. Where all these clubs are going to get good players in the draft. Like, so the Saints are going to get 2, but Melbourne are going to get 2 as well. I mean, Richmond are going to get 4. Carlton are going to get a couple. So all these clubs are going to get good players in the draft. How does that leapfrog you to the next level without doing it more aggressively? So I'd rather see them go, all right, we're going to be bottom 4 for the next 3 years, and then in 3 years' time we're going to be where Hawthorn are. That would be the aim. But right now, they're the epitome of football quicksand.
The breaking news out of Carlton this morning, Kane, is that the vice-captain Jacob Wiedering, this had been coming, but he's agreed and formalised a 6-year contract extension. So the key back signed on at the Blues until 2031. 6 more seasons for him. He had a year running on his existing contract, but didn't muck around and put pen to paper on a new 6-year deal.
Yeah, capitalised on. I mean, the Saints are doing a pretty good job for everyone else in terms of getting them pay rises. They had a good job at doing it for Zach Merritt. Jacob Wiedering, we heard the reports halfway through last year about the offer that was coming through for him. So, yeah, been a great player, hasn't he? Been an All-Australian now and has been so consistent for them and crucial to everything that they do. Needs a bit more help. Haynes, not sure whether he's going to provide that for him or not, but has been doing it solo. Excellent one-on-one defender, but terrific interceptor, and hard to be critical of that. I think he's one player that certainly deserved that security of a deal like that. He's crucial to what they do.
Speaking of support, is this where they hijacked the Barras deal, do you reckon?
Well, they should. They should. I mean, Barras feels more of a need than what Dan Houston does.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether Tom would be open to that, but it's like the Bailey Smith situation when you pictured yourself
I asked that cheekily.
In that jumper. Yeah, but I think it's worth asking. And I'd be surprised if the Blues hadn't picked up the phone and put that pick 14 on the market for Barras, who would come in and instantly form one of the better 1-2 key defensive posts in the league. But it just feels like that he's too far down the line with Hawthorn and so much has been done. And whether Carlton would be able to afford him, Sammy. I mean, they clearly have got some cash because Houston's not going to come cheap.
Oh, not a lot.
Yeah.
No.
What do you think Houston's going to sign for then if he goes to the Blues?
I know, but this is why guys like Kennedy, Owies we'll get to in a minute, Young, all these guys are in the window because they're really tight. And they'll restructure other parts of their list, I'd imagine, if they did get to the stage where Dan Houston was coming in. But Tom De Koning's next. They've got to sign him. Sam Walsh is out at the end of 2026. He's coming up as well. So these are all the big deals that they've got to plan for. Just with Owies, like not the highest profile, of course, but definitely one of the more intriguing stories for me of this year's potential moves. Now, he doesn't have a contract offer at Carlton for 2025. He's kicked 33 goals this season. He's kicked, I think, 60 across the past 2 years, but he won't be going back there. He's done at Carlton. That door is shut. He'll be going somewhere, though, is my mail, in this trade period. Now, he's got a couple of options, so he needs to make a call. I'm told that call could come today. It's been reported already that he's met with West Coast and Gold Coast, but he'll be traded to another club.
Won't be going back.
Won't be going back to Carlton.
Really?
No, that ship has sailed. So his days at the Blues are over, which is in many ways hard to believe, and it's unfolded pretty quickly.
Is it, do you think, in part because he's just going to get bigger offers? Like, I think Carlton would love to keep him at their price, but their price, as you're highlighting, is probably very low compared to what others. We heard the report that his manager was angry about it, about the money
I don't think it's a money
demanding. You don't
it's
think
not a
so?
money. No, not a money issue. I think
can't
he's just
work out why Carlton would be happy to move on from him.
Well, they think their small forward future is tied into the likes of Motlop,
Moyer,
Durden, Ashton Moyer. They want to get games into. List spots are super tight there as well as finances. So the Camporelli boys are coming in. He was just out of contract at the wrong time. If he was signed, they wouldn't be shopping him. He would have stayed, but he would just happen to be out of contract at the wrong time. But it's a brutal caper, summarised by the Matt Owies situation.
Yeah, no, it is brutal, but I think he'll be an excellent addition to another team, and those two, I mean, West Coast can do with anyone with experience and hardness. I really like the way he goes about it. I think he's a really important team member, and often puts himself out there when others haven't been prepared. So I think Carlton will miss him. I really do. I think he's a really important piece to what they do, and pretty hard to just pick up and find 33 goals off the street. And I'm telling you, it's not going to come from Durden, and it's not going to come from Moyer in his second year. I mean, I like him in time, but not yet. And, things would have to go really well for Jesse Motlop to kick 30 plus with his body and the injuries that he had last year. He's got the talent, Jesse, but I think this is a real gamble the Blues are taking.
Dan Houston, let's get to him because Port Adelaide's still working with Collingwood and Gold Coast. It's got so complicated, Kane. There's been so many versions of this multi-club, multiplayer, multiple pick deal that it's hard to give a most recent state of play here. It's also nowhere near it, though. But that can change quickly, as we know. Collingwood, we said earlier, been somewhat frustrated by it, only getting more frustrated. Port missing out on Perryman and Cummings meant they're doubling down, holding out for the best possible deal, as is their right for a player with 4 years to run on a contract, you might add. Richards is involved. Lukosius might be on his own. Houston, obviously, other picks. Houston either goes to Collingwood, North Melbourne, or maybe even stays, as unlikely as I think it's in that order when it comes to...
North Melbourne prepared to give up for him, do you reckon?
Oh, I'm told theirs is the best deal from a Port Adelaide perspective.
We know
and
what
theirs
it looks like?
would be the best contract too. No, we don't. They're hanging back to the Blues and waiting, but it would have to completely unravel with the other clubs. And Carlton are more interested in working up the draft, as we know. So we'll see where that goes. There's been so many versions of it.
So North would have to probably split the pick two,
yeah,
and then give one of them, and it would probably have to be a top 10 pick, I would have thought, for Dan Houston, or maybe even a future first, but I'm not sure Port Adelaide are interested in that. They sort of want to get into this draft, I would imagine. But yeah, that feels like a stretch as well. I mean, that would be ideal for Port Adelaide, but it feels like a stretch.
Well, Jack in Geelong's texting, I just can't believe Jack says that Gold Coast aren't looking to use pick 6 in the draft before the Lombard bid comes in. Now, he says it makes no sense using it for Rioli. They should be giving up 13 for Rioli, as that's fair, and then give 23 for Noble. But I'm not sure. I think the Lombard pick was going to come in before 6 is their expectation.
And they need to be prepared for all those scenarios, and Richmond probably go, well... pick 13, and they've already put pick 6 up. I agree with you. Pick 6 is ridiculous for Rioli. We said that last week. But Richmond have not only got their sights on that, they want more. They want 6 and change. So they're not going to settle for 13 when he's contracted. So, yeah, they're a long way down the path. That surely gets done in the next 24 hours, doesn't it?
You'd think, yeah. Absolutely. I think they all get in, and as this texter says here, they all work the deal out, the 3 clubs. They're all just trying to save face. Jake Stringer, so GWS, they want him, he wants them. If the price is right, now this one's delayed, I think, somewhat by the finer details of the finance, who pays what over the course of a new contract at the Giants. I'd heard 56, which clearly means that they would be paying full freight finance-wise GWS. It might be a couple of picks in the 50s to help the Bombers build points for Isaac Kako, which we know they clearly want to do. But it's going to be something late. I imagine logistics are a play as well from a Jake Stringer perspective when you're relocating up there with the young family that he's got. So I think it happens, but it'll be fascinating to see what it happens for.
Yeah, no, won't be much. And Essendon are pretty keen to get him out the door. And we've spoken about this at length. I really like it. I think it's a bit of a last-minute panic play from GWS. I'm just not sure if it's into their game style, but there's low risk on this one for the Giants, and they would feel like, well, even if we get 15 games out of Jake Stringer and 3 times next year, he's the difference between us winning and losing and finishing top 4 or not, then it's worth the punt that they are going to take. Did you like North Melbourne's approach for Braden Maynard?
Yeah. I didn't mind it. Yeah, why not?
Really loved
you got to do that.
And I mean, and he's a player that would have so many attractions for other clubs. And it's not just about his on-field ability. He's exactly what North Melbourne need. He's exactly what Essendon need. Like, Essendon have been a nice club for a long, long time. Adelaide, how much could they love him? South Australian, they get him in. He's exactly what Adelaide needs. So I think free agent at the end of next year. Am I right in saying that for
I'll check that. But I mean, I'm all for the Hail Mary. I'm all for the Hail Mary. Why not? Anyway,
I think he's the next captain of Collingwood, though. Would be my. I think we spoke at length about Darcy Moore last week, and it's a big year for Darcy Moore after he just doesn't appear to be thriving with that captaincy role. Maynard is the obvious next captain before Nick Dacos can take over, maybe at the age of 24, 25 for Nick, but I think Braden Maynard would make an excellent captain at Collingwood, and they would, they definitely wouldn't want to lose him.